We're surrounded by data and AI, right? And it's so easy to think the biggest challenge is all technical. But you know what? For leaders, the real test is something much more human. It's judgment. Today, we're going to dig into what really makes a data project succeed and what makes it completely fall apart.
This quote right here, it just nails it. We get so impressed by what AI can do, how it can solve problems. But the most important thing a leader can do isn't about finding the solution. It's about having the judgment to pick the right problem to solve in the first place.
And that kind of brings up a weird paradox, doesn't it? We have all these amazing, powerful tools at our fingertips, but a huge number of data projects they fail. They lose steam, they get ignored, or worse, they solve a problem that nobody really cared about. So what's going on here? Where's the disconnect?
Well, it turns out the problem usually isn't the data itself. It's not the algorithms. The real problem is, you guessed it, a lot more human. It's rooted in these really common traps that even the smartest teams fall into.
Yep, these are the classic red flags of a project that's basically doomed before it even starts. You know the story. It begins with a cool solution looking for a problem. You've got teams pulling in opposite directions because their incentives are all out of whack. There's no senior leader really fighting for it, so it just loses momentum. And even if a brilliant model gets built, it just sits on a shelf collecting dust. The end result is always the same: a ton of work for absolutely zero business value.
So how do we dodge these bullets? Well, it takes a pretty big shift in mindset. We've got to stop focusing on just building cool models and start exercising real strategic judgment. And guess what? There's a framework for that, a way to structure your thinking before anyone writes a single line of code.
This framework gives you 4 crucial checkpoints. First up, the problem. Is this thing we're trying to solve actually valuable? Is it real? Then you check for alignment. Is everyone who needs to be on board actually on board, and are they motivated? Next, you got to face the music with trade-offs. What are we willing to give up to make this work? And finally, value. What does a win actually look like here, and how are we going to measure it?
Okay, so theory's great and all, but let's see how this stuff actually plays out in the wild. We're going to look at 3 totally different case studies that show this model in action. You'll see what happens when judgment leads the way, and, well, what happens when it doesn't.
All right, first up, a total success story in fraud analytics. And look at this. The reasons for its success line up perfectly with our judgment model. The team started with a super clear business context. They framed the right problem, not just some vague goal like find fraud, but something specific like cut our financial loss by X%. They got all the right departments aligned and were disciplined enough to actually deploy it, leading to a real measurable impact on the bottom line. It just works.
Now for a bit of a cautionary tale. A company built this really sophisticated sentiment analysis model. They just assumed the tech was so great it would magically change how people behaved. But the reality was a whole different story. There was a ton of cultural resistance. People's incentives weren't lined up with using the new tool. The key takeaway: they made huge assumption errors because they let the tech get way ahead of their judgment.
So our third case is a different kind of beast. A company wanted to fix its knowledge-sharing problem by building an internal wiki. Building the tech, that was the easy part. The real fight was getting people to actually use it. The leaders had this amazing insight. The goal wasn't just technical. It was about changing the company culture to be more collaborative. It's such a great lesson that sometimes the most important system you have to figure out isn't a computer, it's the human one.
You see the pattern here? All these cases point to the exact same unavoidable truth. Whether a project wins or loses, the deciding factor isn't the algorithm. It's not the data, it's the people. Just let that sink in for a second. Data is technical. Value is human. You can have the most perfect data and the most elegant algorithm in the entire world, but if it doesn't connect to a real human need, if it doesn't solve a human problem or fit into a human system, it creates zero value, period.
So what are these human dynamics? Well, it's all the messy stuff. The stuff you can't really quantify. It's the hidden incentives driving why people do what they do. The subtle power games in the office. That natural fear of change we all have. And the absolute need for someone to clearly own the project. This is the real battlefield for a leader.
Okay, so let's make this super practical. We can boil all of this down to a simple but really powerful leadership checklist. Just 4 questions you have to ask before you ever give a data project a green light.
Think about these questions and be really honest. First, who actually benefits if this project is a home run? And just as important, who stands to lose? Let's be real about the internal politics. Second, what is the single biggest, most dangerous assumption you're making, the one nobody is even questioning?
And finally, what's the hidden trade-off, the one you're not talking about? Answering these questions is what leadership judgment is all about. At the end of the day, this is what it all comes down to. As AI and data get easier and easier to access, just being able to build a model won't be special. The real value is going to come from leaders who can bring wisdom, context, and foresight to the table. In other words, judgment. And that leaves us with this one last thought. The tools we use, they're going to keep changing, getting more powerful, more complex. But the fundamental responsibility of a leader, to think critically, to ask the right questions, and to focus on creating real human value, that part never changes. That responsibility is, and always will be, yours.